Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest Public Sector Catering webinar. This morning, we're going to be talking on the subject of hospitals with Robb, Chair of the HCA, and then we'll go on to a panel discussion from the four nations of the Hospital Caterers Association. We have representing Scotland, Janice, representing Wales, Alison, representing Northern Ireland, Tony, and representing England, Iain. You can see their full names and job titles in front of you and where they work. We're just going to wait for people to log in. Once it slows down, I shall pass over, and David Foad, editor of Public Sector Catering, will take over and take you through how this morning's going to work. People are drifting in a bit. I think given the time restrictions, I'm going to pass over to David now. So David, over to you to introduce everybody.
Thank you, Andrew. Good morning, everyone. I'm David Foad, editor of Public Sector Catering magazine, and thank you for joining us for the latest in our webinar series on the future of your service. Today, we'll be looking at hospitals and hearing from Robb, Chair of the Hospital Caterers Association, and later we'll be joined by a panel of speakers representing the NHS across the four nations to look at some of the issues raised by Brian and answer some of your questions. The vitally important role of feeding patients, staff and visitors in hospitals seems to be rarely out of the news, and it has been a focus of particular attention within the NHS and the wider public since the publication of the Hospital Food Review just over a year ago. If you throw into the mix the HCA's own internal governance changes, the fact the NHS itself is divided among the four nations, England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and the role of the sector is expected to play in helping the government meet its net zero carbon reduction commitments, then you can see there's plenty to talk about. So I'm delighted to welcome to our webinar, Robb, Chair of the HCA. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, David.
And we will shortly see an interview with Brian we recorded earlier. And later he will be joined by a panel that consists of Janice Gillan, Head of Clinical Support Service, NHS Ayrshire and Arran. Good morning, Janice. You're on mute, Janice.
I'm good.
Good morning. We also have Tony O'Hara, Patient Experience Manager for the South Eastern Health and Social Care Trust in Northern Ireland. Good morning, Tony.
Morning, David. Morning, everybody.
There's also Iain Robertson, Catering Operations Manager for Solent NHS Trust. Hello, Iain.
Good morning, David. Good morning, everyone.
And we also have Alison Howells, General Manager of the Central Production Unit at Cwmtaf University Health Board. Alison, are you there with us?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, yeah. Glad to have you all along. Before all of that, a quick reminder about how the webinar will work. Other than the panelists and me, everyone will be muted. If you want to get in touch during the webinar, which we very much encourage you to do, you can put a question to the panelists using the Q&A function. Please include your name and company. There's no need to wait until we start taking questions. You can post one at any time. If you just want to comment, then get involved using the chat function, remembering to choose the option to all panelists and attendees. We won't, unfortunately, be able to answer any questions you post to chat. Right, let's hear what Brian had to say when I spoke to him last week.
Right, well, good afternoon, Brian, and thank you for giving up your time today to talk to us.
Thanks for inviting me, David. I'm delighted to be here.
Okay, I wanted to just start by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself, your career in the NHS, and how you've ended up coming to be chair of the Hospital Caterers Association.
Okay, I don't know if you've got long enough for that, but I'll try and give it as brief as I can. So I joined the NHS on the 1st of June 1981 as a chef, having spent the previous 7 years working in the hotel trade in a hotel called the North British Hotel. It's now the Balmoral. And I attained up to a level of a junior sous chef. And when in all honesty, when I attained that position, I felt I needed a change. The hours of work, pay and conditions that were actually on offer within the NHS appealed to me. But I knew that the environment was totally different. And it was different. Certainly within 6 months, I'd met my wife. We were married 2 years later. Happy days. I think while working as a chef as well, I helped to make changes in our environment and how we operated. I mean, who doesn't remember the never-ending stock pot that you had in a kitchen in those days? And I had an opportunity to go into first-line management around 91. And those opportunities back in that time were infrequent, to say the least. And from there, I took on a number of roles. And it wasn't until 1999 that I heard of the HCA from a colleague. And my line manager, surprisingly, at that time tried to dissuade me from joining. But I was intrigued. And I often felt that at the time I worked in silo. So, you know, I was curious. I joined the East of Scotland branch in 2000. Mary Smith was our chair. She'd just come out of a stint as national chair. And surprisingly, within 2 years, I was branch chair. And then in 2008, I became the council rep for the branch. And that was really the start of me trying to understand fully the HCA, where some of the decision-making processes were taken. And then I followed on to joining the executive team. And again, it was about what decision-making, but also a further opportunity to learn from individuals with similar passion for what we do as caterers, and also how we can perhaps influence decision-making process. Becoming the national chair probably wasn't on my radar, if I'm being honest. And indeed, at times, due to work commitments, I couldn't see how individuals could even do that role or carry out their day job and give, you know, the attention that this kind of role actually deserves. So it was probably around just 6 months before Craig was moving into being national chair, and they said, "So what do you think about being my running mate, so to speak, and being vice chair?" And I knew I was just about to come to the end of a commissioning process with a new hospital, and I thought, well, it's now or never. And that's how actually I fell into being national chair.
Well, you mentioned learning to understand the HCA, and the HCA's just undergone a change in governance. So what has changed, and why was it necessary, and ultimately how will members benefit?
So the Hospital Caterers Association, or HCA, it was originally formed as an unincorporated association in October 1948. It's been under its original constitution for 73 years. So that's quite a long time. And during that process, during the time that I've been a member, you know, we've looked at the constitution in various guises. We've made some small tweaks in terms of rules or wordings to rules to move with the times. And a few years back, our president asked our Vice President, Mark Heyman, to carry out a review of our constitution. That was back in 2018. And we started that process. So it goes back to Stuart Mackenzie's reign as a national chair. We started that process. We spoke about it at our executive meetings and our council meetings. And we then decided to look at review it and identify what gaps existed. In September 2018, we then went down to London to a meeting with Lord Hunt and the House of Lords, and we discussed widening the review to include risk and organisational structure that would maybe fit with our associations. And some of that risk that we spoke about was around financial risk as well to the organisation. We needed to be a bit more, well, we were already concerned around, forums not taking place and what have you. So we just needed to understand a bit more what that presented to us. That led to us having discussions with our branch study day with our members, and therein Craig went into the chair and we entered into some dialogue with our membership, looking at articles of association, how that could fit with our organisation. And I have to say, I didn't think the process would have taken as long as it did, but COVID impacted on a lot of that. So when I came into chair in April of this year, we set a tight timeline to try and make sure that we delivered. We had spent a lot of time talking about it, and we needed to actually get it over the line. So, we became a company limited by guarantee on the 1st of November, started trading then. What does it mean to our members? It means, for me, I think, continuity of our association, making sure that we're more resilient. And the modernisation programme is not finished. It's going to continue for some period of time yet. We are only in the first phase, as I see it. Our council reps now become directors of a company. That brings with it different stewardship, different statutory duties that we need to be able to support individuals, let them understand what that means for them, and also let their workplace understand what that means, because they're going to be releasing those members of staff to be a part of our association and to be sitting in the national tables, shall we say. So in terms of branch membership, it's exactly the same. It's going to lead to some slight changes, perhaps in the way we deal with our finances and what have you. But overall, the ethos of the association will not change. It's about promoting catering excellence. That's what we're about.
Okay, thank you. Governance obviously hugely important from an organisational point of view, but the HCA ultimately exists to help its members. And I just wonder, there may well be some people listening today who are not members. What would you say to them about why they should consider joining?
So just as I pointed out, I think in one of the first questions you asked me, for a long time I felt like I was working in silo. And I think that in itself, there may well be individuals out there that may feel like that they don't feel they've got a networking opportunity. I mean, the Hospital Caterers Association encompasses the single largest group of healthcare catering providers within the NHS, and it's the recognised voice of hospital catering. It represents catering managers who provide a wide range of food and other services for patients, visitors, staff in the NHS hospitals and healthcare facilities. The HCA is a national organisation. We have 15 branches throughout England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and more than 250 hospitals represented in its membership. Our association leads on the promotion of professional standards that enhance and improve NHS catering services, which support clinical requirements across the 4 nations. We've just embarked on webinars to engage with our members and bring them up to date in a more, a different type of format. We do have a strategy that exists for our association, which tells people where we're likely to go. That's about to be renewed. And also being part of our association, we have working groups. That's been a complete refresh. We used to call it a GP committee, and it was normally made up of council members. But what we're doing now is we've reviewed that, and we're actually trying to actively get branches to work together. And some of the things that our working groups are looking at are good practice guides in education and training, good practice guides for food waste, a good practice guide for retail. And we're also looking at, again, as we've said, within the webinars, we're going to be speaking to our members and say, what is it that you want to hear from us? So I think, all in all, for the amount of money our association costs to join as a member. It's very small for what you get.
Sure, thank you. Now, the devolved structure of hospital catering presents a number of opportunities and benefits. But I wonder, do you think hospital caterers do a good enough job of sharing what they learn, particularly what works well?
Well, as I've just said, best practice is something that we all should be benefiting from. And we probably do share best practice sometimes within our own trusts or within our close neighbours. But the HCA actually is given that opportunity to share best practice, and even more so now. One of the things that I've tried to look at, certainly within our journal, is to promote a campaign which we had started a couple of years ago and seems to have waned a little bit. And that was 24/7, 365 nutrition and hydration, looking at the core business of food provision with a Four Nations feel. So we've created a space within our journal, and we're asking within the Four Nations for folks to come forward with what they've got as best practice. And what we're currently looking at is we're going to do it. Northern Ireland, I think, are up first. Then we're going to look at Wales, then Scotland, and then England as separate entities, and then see where that progresses. So hopefully some of the best practice around nutrition and hydration, at least, will be brought to the fore. Okay, now I'm sure you're as aware as anyone else that there hardly a day goes by without a story about the NHS and some sort of impending crisis. And I just wondered, from your perspective, what are the biggest challenges facing hospital caterers at the moment? Well, there are some obvious ones. Funding will always be a challenge to bring some much needed improvements. And as I've mentioned previously, caterers in hospitals also provide dining room and retail for staff and visitors, and health and well-being is at the fore. During pandemic, hospitals have seen income vastly reduced due to some areas having to close their retail outlets. Footfall's been decreased, especially where visiting was restricted. Social distancing still exists. And of course, staffing capability can also disrupt not only retail, but patient services. You couple that with the staffing resource issues, and hospitals are not the first option on someone's list if they want to get into the hospitality trade. Indeed, you just need to look at the commercial hospitality sector and the difficulties they are having at attracting staff at this point in time. So pay also plays a major concern for catering and attracting staff. And there is quite a disparity across the country relating to pay, especially in relation to trade chefs. And that is something I think that needs to be addressed very quickly by government. Okay, well, you've got your sort of your wish list in your mind. If I was able to wave a magic wand and give you an audience with the Prime Minister right now, or the heads of any of the devolved nations, for example, what would you tell them was needed to address these challenges you've just outlined? So, hospital catering is always seen as a healthcare Cinderella service. It's an easy target for cost improvement programmes. And it's dependent on trust or boards choosing to invest in the service or not. When bidding against clinical services for investment, catering equipment and essential infrastructure is often overlooked, even although food and nutrition plays such an important role in the recovery of patients. It's important that the need for continued investment in food production and service be understood and supported to ensure that the provision of safe, nutritious food, which meets statutory legal obligations, is met. So, there's a number of things: adequate funding and sufficient budget allocation for patient foods, annual savings that are required from catering budgets as part of efficiency programmes from a budget that's already at a low base, needs to start. That needs to stop. The hospital caterer needs to deliver safe, nutritious food and hydration. We've got many sites that are working with insufficient budget for food, yet they're required to provide hot meals, 3 hot meals a day, beverages for each and every patient. So a ring fencing of catering budgets for patient food is essential to ensure that hospital caterers can meet all the nutritional and dietary requirements. And we would suggest a minimum protected patient day funded food cost. Something that equates to the average food cost across 4 nations would be a good starting point. That probably looks like something £4.40 a day, but that's only on food. Funding for food standards. It's essential to ensure that the standards are implemented across the country, but catering standards and quality are paramount to ensure patients are appropriately cared for and to ensure malnutrition is addressed. Food standards are necessary to underpin the National Food Review and to support changing clinical requirements. Food safety. It's implicit within all catering environments to ensure compliance with the Food Safety Act 1990, provide safe food to patients and staff, but the lack of capital investment in equipment and infrastructure can impede that provision of safe and nutritious food and drink, as well as safe service delivery models. A national training scheme, is something that's kind of was sitting there, but it's gone now. I think that needs to be revisited. It would be something that would be welcomed. It would help us certainly with our succession planning when we start to look at management. That again can be a struggle within our departments. So we want to make sure that whoever is going into senior roles or management roles, first line management roles, that they have the appropriate tools at hand to be able to help them. Index-linked budgets. I think external influences on the supply chain, such as the impact of climate change, inflation, crop failures, commodity markets, they can all have a detrimental impact on food budgets. However, more often than not, the additional costs become unfunded pressures. So index linking budgets are essential for me, and this would ensure clearly defined catering standards can be delivered across the country without regional divisions and a potential for looking at levelling up. Health and wellbeing for staff is an initiative that's been ongoing, and especially during COVID, it's something that's really coming to the fore. And it was introduced, to improve morale. And it's essential that clinical and non-clinical staff have got access to safe and nutritional food day and night. But it requires a funding stream. Before COVID, catering budgets were often seen as a soft touch to produce savings and subject to efficiency cuts, as I've said. But this approach is detrimental to the health and well-being of staff. So, if we want to be serious about this, they need to be serious about giving us that budget. I've spoken about recognised training already, but digital technology is probably the last key element for us. We need to embrace digital technology, but in order to do that, we need our staff trained properly in digital technology. We can put in systems that give us a variety of data, but we need our staff trained to be able to actually look at that data and understand it and tell us what it means, because you can get quite a lot from data that's provided by some of these systems nowadays. So I think that's probably the most I would say there. Quite a bit, really.
Okay, Brian, thank you for that. Now, you made reference earlier to the listeria outbreak in 2019, which prompted the hospital food review, and you made that food safety is core to the role of the hospital caterer. And I just wonder to what extent any changes that have been made since give you confidence that the chances of a repeat are small to vanishing?
That's a good question, and I think you can never be overconfident that there will be a repeat. And I say that because of all the different facets involved, from the supply chain, especially the chilled supply chain, receipt and storage, production, delivery models, the control of the last 9 yards. But I'm confident that the measures that we have in place will certainly minimise any potential risk. I know that all hospitals are well aware of legislation, hazard analysis and critical control point systems, and many sites have quality systems in place to provide external audit. To say that it would be completely gone, I think would be probably tantamount to us becoming overconfident and complacent. So I think, we just always need to be on our guards and reviewing what we do.
Sure. Okay. Now, the first ever NHS chef competition was held recently. It only involved trust teams from England, but there is talk of perhaps taking this and making it a UK-wide event. Is that something the HCA would be happy to see? Absolutely.
And I did have that discussion with Phil earlier in the process leading to the NHS chef competition. I mean, the first event was clearly being delivered by NHS E&I, and it excluded the 3 other nations. Now, our normal route would have been via the hotel, restaurant and catering show. But again, that would have been held in London Excel, and it would have been open to the 4 nations to do something there. I think some of our members also had a desire to hold their own local events, which were impacted by COVID restrictions. And I have to congratulate Phil on what was achieved, and also the support given to all the participants by their respective trusts, especially under the current conditions with COVID, the staffing demands that would probably be placed on their catering departments during this period. And this HCA will certainly be part of any review of what's possible and take the lead from our members and going forward. So, if there's a potential and desire for a national event, then why not? But we need teams to enter it. If that happens, and I think that's always been a struggle, was to be able to get enough people to enter. Although we have some very good branches throughout England, certainly, that provide their own, do their own thing, and it's great to see.
Right, thank you, Brian. Now, moving on now to climate change, which for someone who lives quite close to Glasgow, you've probably been very well aware of recently. Now, the UK government's going to be pushing its net zero commitments in the wake of COP26, and I wonder what part is there for hospital caterers to play in measuring and reducing the carbon footprint of the food chain from farm to fork?
Quite a lot, actually. There's a lot that we can be doing, and in fact, there's a lot that's been done. Let's not discount what's actually been happening in that field already. I myself have been involved in fork to plate sort of regimes for probably 15 years. But certainly, a procurement journey, that's the first thing that springs to mind for me. Considering menu options and whether there's a desired move to seasonal menus. If that's the case, then we really need to be speaking with the NFU. Can they deliver what we want? It's easy to say we want to change that part, but because we're living with climate change, crops have been destroyed in a lot of areas. So it's not always easy to deliver. We need to make sure that it's secure. So discussion with the supply chain, reduction in the food miles, local sourcing. What does that actually mean? Does local sourcing just mean local to you, or does it mean UK wide, or is it specifically just Scotland? I think that definition needs to be looked at. SMEs, so small to medium businesses, consider small businesses and ensuring that that we try and attract them into our environment. But we also need to make sure that they meet our legislative requirements. And if they don't, provide support. If they don't, or advise them on a way forward. It may well be somebody might be interested in a contract just now, not ready, but within a bit of help, the next time a contract's retendered, they may well be able to support that and come in. How we manage our production methods, where we can reduce our waste at that stage, is really important. Food ordering, getting the numbers right, not only on producing what you need, but looking at what, patient numbers, what patients are actually ordering, and only cooking to the requirements that you have. That leads to us perhaps reducing our patient waste, but then also looking with an inquiring mind at patient waste. Why does it happen? Why do we overorder? What's the quality of the food like? Is the food delivery times right for that ward area? Is the model actually meeting the demand? So trying to keep on trend as well with whatever patients want, but review not only your production and delivery models, but also the demographic of your patients. That's key to the type of service provision required. And everybody's living older, and I'm going to be one of them. So, I mean, the type of requirement I might need in dietary needs is likely to change in the foreseeable future. So there's lots we can do in relation to waste, and there is lots of work going on. And it just doesn't just stop at food. It's about sustainable products. It's about, for example, in Scotland, we've just, with it by June next year, we will have stopped single-use plastics. But by December coming up, we won't be purchasing any. Just simple things like that. But it's looking at alternatives and things that can start to get us towards that end goal. Trying to keep 1.5 alive.
Finally, Brian. The HCA have got their Leadership and Development Forum in Liverpool next March, and I wonder, this will be your first one as chair, your first live one. What are you looking forward to?
Wow. I can't wait for this event. We'll be returning to the very venue where our last event was held, and it'll be 3 years since. It was 2019. And what an impact COVID has had. And I'd firstly like to say to our forum management team, they have been so patient and hardworking throughout. Carol Delves, the forum secretary, has held us together through all our trials and tribulations, and now holds the record as the longest serving forum secretary. Not one I think Carol would want, but she does. So our title is Embrace the Future, and it commences formally on the 30th of March. And over 2 days, we've got the opportunity to visit over 90 trade stands, which is fantastic. The supplier support has been absolutely immense. And I personally can't wait to meet up with like-minded colleagues, catering managers, or members especially. And we also have that opportunity on the Tuesday night before we start with a small icebreaker event. I think the one-to-one and social networking is so important to many who may not have been able to get about, and that includes myself. We'll be talking about waste, sustainability, innovation, and there'll certainly be a theme and no doubt an update on the National Food Review, where it's got to. The programme of events it's been constantly updated due to delay to make sure it's fresh, and I'm sure it's going to be relevant and challenging, thought-provoking, and I'm sure all those that attend will return to their respective organisation with some new ideas added, confidence, and be able to challenge the norm, whatever that's going to look like, I would suppose.
That all leads us very nicely into the second part of the webinar, when we get our panel to join you to answer questions from the audience. So thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
Right, well, we're back live now, and I'd like to get the reactions of our panelists to what they've heard Brian just talking about. Janice, can I come to you first?
Yes, thank you very much. Hope you can hear me this time. As Brian has said, that
you're a little bit quiet, Janice. If I can just say so, right. Is there any chance you could?
Okay. That's it. The loudest.
Yeah, I'm told that's coming through okay now. So thank you. Yeah, sorry. Continue.
Right, thank you. As Brian has said, that the HCA itself is about, we all always feel we're working in silos, perhaps in all our organisations, but whether it be within the nations or within the 4 nations. I'm sure any one of us that are members can all phone each other up quite easily now, and that's how it's a great networking opportunity. But also when there's major events happening like Listeria or Horsemeat that I personally had involvement in, you were able to reassure the UK public that the hospital food was safe across the whole of the UK. The COVID restrictions, I would have to say, it sometimes feels like you're in a parallel universe. You've got the health and well-being looking for support from catering departments versus the finance, constant restrictions. I cannot believe the constant restrictions we're in, and even being a very cost-effective service. But for our retail areas, the biggest challenge is we've been seen as a business. So are we a business or a service? And if we're a service, it needs to be funded like that. I'll pass on to someone else now. Thank you.
Okay, Janice, yeah, thank you for that. Tony, your thoughts on what you heard?
Yeah, so first of all, yeah, I mean, most of it very interesting. It is good when we get together as a group, because although it is for devolved nations, we all have the same issues and concerns, and certainly I would have been bringing up the same stuff as Brian around the funding, health and well-being, what that looks like in our restaurants, and managing the expectations, because everybody's expectation of that is different. So managing the expectations. The footfall has had a huge impact on us in social distancing, and also with the COVID, and obviously we don't want to concentrate on the COVID, but the impact of our staffing in the early days, whenever you lost staff and you still had the same amount of patients and staff to feed, was a huge strain on managers working within that area. Janice is right, the networking that we get from the HCA is fantastic, and although we haven't seen each other for coming up to 3 years, the virtual Zoom has really helped, certainly within Northern Ireland. We have a great turnout for our meetings now. It's a bit of a nuisance. I'm the secretary, so trying to get it set up always has you a worry, and trying to watch people admit. But no, and I think too, where Brian was saying about the catering, again, it's about trying to glamorise the catering. Obviously, a lot of people go in early to the new trendy restaurants, but obviously that's what we're trying to bring into the hospitals, because that's what the staff are looking.
Okay, thanks for that, Tony. Iain, can I come to you now? Your thoughts on what you've heard?
I agree with everything everybody said, but to expand on what Tony was saying there, the staffing issues that we're facing, we're not a glamorous proposition for students. However, I think Brian started his story saying they had been in the NHS since 1981, and I think that's reflective of a lot of us. I'm maybe a few years behind Brian, but you know, I'm still 20 odd years in, and I'm sure if you go into any trust, there's loads of us that are in that position 20, 30, 40 years, and there's a reason for that. And maybe that's what we need to push. That's what we need to push. Why do these people stay so long? Because once you're in, it is a good place to work. Something else that Brian mentioned, which is of interest to me, was the road to net zero. Obviously, one of the key things is local procurement, but we need to put the mechanisms in place to achieve that. There's a reason why as caterers we buy off the big framework suppliers, because it's easy and it's safe. We need to have the same levels of safeness and easiness to buy locally and then it will be done. If those mechanisms are put in place, trust will achieve that.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Sorry, Iain.
I was going to say, and again, the networking, that is the key, the main benefit for me of the HCA is being able to pick up a phone and talk to somebody about what they're doing about certain issues. But yeah, definitely the networking.
That's great, thank you. And Alison, be interested to hear your reaction to what you've heard.
Well, I got them all headed here, and everything that my colleagues have said in Scotland, Ireland is all right. Got procurement, funding, health and well-being. The restrictions in Wales are very much like the Scotland and Ireland. You know, we're very limited in what we can do here in the health board. Staff at the dining rooms, the staff restaurants and dining rooms, only staffing allowed. So, you know, we talk about having income coming in. There is no income only within the staff, so they've lost a lot of income within the restaurants. You know, I echo what Iain said about, you know, we talk about staffing. You know, at the moment we are struggling with staffing. I've just completed my 40-year service in the NHS back in October. You know, and I've only discussed this with colleagues throughout half. You know, we're not seeing that generation anymore. We're not seeing the people coming in. And, you know, and it's something I think that we all really seriously need to look at is, you know, thinking about apprenticeships, you know, bringing these, you know, these people in to give them some sort of apprenticeship within the NHS, you know, because we don't seem to see, I don't in Wales, I don't know if the rest of my colleagues across the country does. I'm not seeing the vacant posts I put out now. I'm not seeing the people who with the training anymore, you know, and I think it's something that perhaps we should look at in drawing people in and looking at apprenticeships, you know. But everything that Brian have said in all what he said this morning, I echo everything he says. You know, echo everything he says, and I think, you know, he's right in everything. You know, I agree totally with everything that he's been saying so far, and that's across the country, isn't it?
Yeah, that's good to hear, Alison. Thank you very much for that. It seems fairly clear from what pretty much all of you have said is that issues of staff recruitment, retention, and training are really quite a big issue. So it'd be interesting, Brian, maybe if I can come to you, because one of the questions that's come up is, does the HCA have a vision for recruitment and training of staff? Is there something that the association has in mind to try and address this issue?
Well, first of all, I would have to say that as an association, we would certainly have an aspiration to be able to try and educate as to where we should be going in terms of future recruitment, retention and training. But that's down to trusts and boards to deliver that financially. And again, it goes back to what I was saying around making sure that we have the appropriate budgets in place to be able to support caterers in the first place, to include infrastructure and training. It's interesting that the recruitment retention is now becoming such an issue. At the beginning of COVID, we were probably overrun with staff that we, because people were on furlough, places were closing down, folks lost jobs, and they came to us in their droves, and we managed to retain some. But I think the key element for me now is certainly for chefs. And actually, I had a conversation yesterday with my catering manager, which was really concerning. For the last 5 months, we've been trying to recruit a chef into one of our rural establishments. And, from the interviews that have taken place, the quality of chef that's coming now is not the same. Hospitality sector is also struggling. But from a wage perspective, we can't compete with what's happening outside right now. There are rumours of chefs being offered £25 an hour so that establishments can reopen. Hospitality staff are being offered incredible wages. And it was only about, I would say, 4 years ago that the NHS, prior to that, but we'd embarked on a agenda for change, and we had started to see a levelling up of some of our pays, band 2 to band 3. We got rid of band 1 and everybody moved to a band 2 payment. So we started to see an increase in wages, but we've not seen that same increase happening within the sector in catering in relation to chefs. So for me, and I had a discussion very late last night, I have to say, around apprenticeships within my own board, because I do think that we need to start to relook at that. We probably suffered in the NHS over the piece, maybe over the last 15 to 20 years, where a lot of PFIs were introduced and we went down different routes. We went down different delivery models. So we went to a direct food service, which was a frozen type service, which ultimately de-skilled staff and took traditional kitchens out. We've also moved from a model of straight catering into facilities. So, for, you know, what we are actually offering now is something totally different at this point in time. But and I think the need for chefs has kind of been overlooked. Our workforce is getting older, and you know that's indicative. I mean, I'm one of the ones that's going to be leaving this industry in the near future. And again, if you just look at succession planning on that point, it's not good, I would suggest. So I absolutely think it's key that, you know, there's been some work getting done in England now, chef academies and what have you. But I think trusts and boards, NHS Scotland, for example, we need to start to revisit this. There needs to be a reintroduction in how we're actually going to meet apprenticeship schemes. It does need funded, without a shadow of a doubt. And we need to make sure that apprenticeships are not just age specific, that they can actually go into later years. We need that financial support to support people. So, you know, at the moment, I think we're probably looking at apprenticeships between the age of 16 to 26. That might need to be broadened, because there may well be people out there who have foregone a period of working because they've brought up families and they want to return to the workplace, perhaps just need to get that confidence and skill building reintroduced. So I'm not sure that answers the question totally. I don't think as the HCA we will have the financial clout to be able to create an academy per se that's run by the HCA, but we can certainly influence and perhaps guide and be part of that aspiration.
Sure, thank you very much. Tony, Brian made the point that to some extent it's down to the boards and trusts to put these recruitment and retention policies into place and to fund them properly. So I wonder how that works in Northern Ireland. Yeah, well, I mean, we would have within our trust quite a good retention policy and procedure, and we do have quite a good retention of staff. But I think Brian there made a good point. I mean, it needs to go back to the start where we're actually bringing in caterers to do catering. We're not bringing in frozen meals. So if you have a service that is cooked, chilled, cooked, freeze, there is no skill there to adapt. So I think we need as caterers to be feeding that up to the trust boards. If this is what you want, then this is what we need to fund it. And something around that we're looking at. You know, I think we need to go back to where you sort of were growing your own cooks and encouraging the staff and giving them the day release to go to college to do. I started off my catering in the Royal Hospitals, and that certainly was something that they had endeavoured. I came out of catering college, but a lot of people further along the lines then moved in. In Northern Ireland, we have just done away with band ones. Literally, we're in the process of doing away with band ones and moving people to band twos. But even in Northern Ireland, we would have, in the trusts, we would have band 2 cooks and other trust band 3 cooks. So there's even a bit of work within our own area. And all the guys are right. You know, there are people that started in catering in the hospital 35 years ago, the same time as I did, that are still working in the hospital. And then there are other people who have gone into different fields, because within catering, your skills can be transferable. Okay, thank you very much. Iain, if I can turn to you now. You made an interesting point that once you're in the catering in the NHS, you tend to stay for quite a long time. So I just wondered if you had any sort of ideas about how the industry can, I suppose, attract the young people in the first place.
Absolutely, yes. So retention is not the issue, or certainly not the issue we experience. It's recruitment in the first instance. How we attract those people in, I think you need to target the colleges. Something that our branch, Wessex branch of the HCA do is we run, under normal circumstances, due to COVID it's not happened, but we run an annual competition at Bournemouth and Paul College where hospital chefs compete alongside students. So the students see the standard of food that is produced in hospital kitchens, and it's just raising awareness to them at that stage that this is what's happening in hospitals. We know that when they finish college, they're not looking at hospitals, they're looking at your restaurants and your hotels. But a few years later, when they're fed up of working split shifts until 1 o'clock in the morning, you might have just planted a seed to remind them of what's going on in hospitals. I think initiatives like that is what's needed to just raise awareness outside of what is happening in hospitals.
Okay, thank you very much. Alison, if I can bring you in on this point, you actually talked about apprenticeships and you mentioned those. I wondered to what extent apprenticeships are used, if at all, in your experience in Wales?
They currently not, there's no apprenticeships here, but I know as part of Cwmtaf's Maganw's board is, and it's only just come into vision really, they're going down the route of looking now. There's big talk about, I think there's something going on in Cardiff next week, that they're going to be doing a discussion on looking at apprenticeships, not just for catering. I think as a trust-wide, you know, it was something that I discussed with colleagues of mine within the health board only last week, you know, because what I do here in the central production unit that I operate here, we train within, we give the opportunity within, because we lost. I'll give a little bit of a background to, I was interviewing back last year during COVID, and I interviewed a lady for a kitchen supervisor's role, and she worked in one of the local colleges not far from where we are, and she was a lecturer assistant there, and I said, oh, could you tell me what have interested you in coming here? She said, because the catering college have closed, because not enough students are coming in. And that gave me a big worry and a concern, because if we're not having the students going into the colleges, we're not going to get the chefs coming out. And, you know, and that's where I looked at, because we used to have them come in here many years ago for work experience, used to come here. Then that fell down because the health boards wouldn't ensure the individual to come. So that stopped. So it gave me thought in the catering assistant over the years, as I've been in management, was to give them the opportunity to train as a cook. So we done that, and we talked about length of service, and Iain talked about that when you come in, you know, length of service. And I got a young boy who came in at 16, and he came in as a catering assistant, and we trained him. We give him the adequate training he require, and the levels that the level 2s and 3s are required to do. And he's now one of my cooks, and he's been that for 20 odd years. You know, and he's 41 now. So, you know, we give the opportunity within the department to progress. But what concerns me, are we going to get them coming through the colleges? That's what our biggest concern is. And this is what I put to when I attended a meeting last week. And when they talked about apprenticeships, I thought, well, what a good idea to bring them people, you know, to see if we can get them people in and give them the opportunity to do that. But, you know, like Brian said about the pays, you know, is that enough to draw these people into the NHS? You know, that's my biggest concern again as well. You know, when, like Brian said, they're offering lots more money now in the hospitality industry, aren't they?
Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you very much for that, Alison. Janice, be interesting to hear your experience at your particular trust, whether you are having problems recruiting, whether pay is an issue, and well, what about the idea of you know, apprenticeships? Is that something that you've considered?
Absolutely. Actually, we had a sort of grow your own type experience for some time. In fact, one of my team, who's probably on this call today, who's now our deputy catering manager, was actually someone that we invested in many years ago, her along with many others, because we have lots of women who come into these jobs because it fits with their family life. And once the children kind of grow up, it's then their time. So we had quite a number of staff who had maybe been catering assistants, catering supervisors, who were interested in cooking, and we put through the local college to get qualifications and to sort of grow your own. I do fully agree with all comments about apprenticeships. We'd be very, very keen for that. We always want to develop particularly youngsters or maturer students. The funding nowadays, because the funding that we had then is gone. So anything at all we need to fund.
Okay. Thank you, Janice. Right, I wanted to move on now to another topic, which has come up in one of the questions that's been posted here about procurement, and the idea of having all of the devolved governments getting together to create one single supply chain to benefit the wider NHS. And I just wondered, Brian, whether there is a sort of an HCA view on whether that might be a good idea or even practical.
Well, I suppose that's a question for procurement colleagues to actually answer. You know, I'll make no secret of the fact that we're very fortunate in Scotland with our procurement, and have been for a good number of years. All our boards have signed up to go through national contracts, and that's probably easy for a smaller country, given that we've got something like 15 boards. And I think originally when we did this, there may well have been 17 boards in place. And we've got a very, very good procurement strategy. We are also, you know, we have an individual who leads procurement for us on our behalf. We have regular procurement meetings. We are all involved in the tendering process, and we all fully understand what that process is like when we set up those frameworks. Each of those frameworks also has a lead person. I myself as the lead for the milk contract, which is, you would think, well, that's a dead easy one. But actually, you'd be surprised the amount of issues that could create. And it's just something that's a staple involvement. In terms of your question, can it work more centralised? I raised that very question. I think it was in Wessex branch. And there was somebody from procurement. I might have got it wrong. It might not be in Wessex, but I'm sure it was. There was somebody procurement on the call where I sort of mentioned that we should be looking at you know, bringing more procurement departments together. And they didn't think that it would work, but it would work on a regional basis. Now, England is very diverse. England is so diverse that, you know, we have hospitals and trusts who are actually adjacent to each other that don't even talk. And they all have their own procurement ways. And I am aware that there has been a strategy to try and sort that. I'm not so sure how successful that has been. I'd probably leave that for Iain to answer. There is a drive, certainly with the National Food Review, to raise the profile of actually working more local. And again, that's something that we do within Scotland. We actually work with SMEs that may have actually applied to go down the tender process, but not quite ready. But we give them the support to go further and to actually perhaps reapply in a while later on. But, you know, that's my position. Would it work across the whole of the country? The buying power would be great, but I'm not so sure it would actually.
All right, thank you. A very, very, very honest answer there. Iain, now obviously you can't speak for the whole of England, but I just wonder, in your experience, do you at your trust collaborate with any others in terms of procurement, and to what extent is that working to your benefit?
Honestly, currently no. It's something that's just starting with some local neighbouring trusts, but there's not been a lot of movement on it. Would it work on a larger scale? If I'm honest with Brian, I don't know if it would, because I think, like you say, with part of the food review and the proposed government buying standards coming, there's this this need to start looking at local procurement. I touched on that earlier when I said that the mechanisms need putting in place to achieve that first and foremost. So if we are looking at more local suppliers, I don't know how that would work on a national scale, really. But yeah, that's kind of my view there. I think the focus needs to shift towards your local procurement.
Okay, thank you for that. Tony, could you perhaps just fill us in a little bit on how procurement works in Northern Ireland, and whether you would see any sort of practical application for trying to widen the base of that to make it possibly even national?
Yeah, sure. Sorry for having to nip out there. My heating's broke, so the fella has just arrived to try to fix the heating. Yeah, so in Northern Ireland, we only have 5 health trusts now, 6 if you count the ambulance service. So all of the procurement, all of the catering procurement is done regionally. So we have one procurement department, and a representative from every trust sits on the contract adjudication groups. They have got a bit challenging at the minute because people want to be able to get their own stuff. So, you know, we could end up with 13 different sizes of chicken breast, whereas 120 to 160 could do everybody. Some people want 155 to 175, but regionally all of the catering comes through one procurement, and everybody is signed up to the same suppliers.
Okay, that's brilliant. Alison, be great to get a sort of Welsh perspective on this, and also perhaps you could sort of address the issue of local suppliers and how that works too.
Very much like Ireland, really. That's exactly, we got one procurement central for all of Wales. We got our local procurement for each health board, but we do very much the same as Ireland. We do the same contracts. Whether it would nationally, I don't know. I've got the same opinion as everyone else, really, who've spoken so far. But we procure as much as local as we can. We got a lot of Welsh health suppliers here in Wales, and we purchase a lot of our contracts are through them. You know, as much as we can, and we're still looking more towards, you know, local sourcing. But like everyone else, it's very difficult to be able to source everything locally.
Sure. Okay. Now I'm very conscious that we are starting to run over our hour, and I don't want to take things on too long. But at the same time, there's an awful lot that we haven't been able to address in perhaps the depth that we would have liked. So perhaps there's one final question that someone's come in about the role of technology in the future as far as hospital catering is concerned. It's something that Brian addressed when he spoke. So I wonder if I could just get a sort of a quick comment from each of you in turn on the issue of technology. Is there much need for it? And if there is, do you see any possibility of investment coming in to meet that need? Iain, can I go to you first on this one?
Yeah, of course. Of course, there's a need for technology. You know, everything's progressing and we need to progress with it. Otherwise, we'll get left behind. And when we're saying that we need to be an attractive proposition for recruitment, how can we be if we're left behind? So we're all aware of the benefits technology brings. One of the key recommendations from the Hospital Food Review was that all trusts procure an electronic meal ordering system. I'm conscious from a meeting that I was involved in that there may be some national money made available for trusts that really need it. But absolutely, it can't be ignored. We have to invest in technology, and in time you will see the return on that and the savings that it generates through, you know, waste reduction, stock control, those things.
Thank you very much, Iain. Janice, at Ayrshire and Arran, have you got an electronic meal ordering system?
We don't at this point in time, but that's probably due to the labour resource it would require to operate it. But what I would say from a digital perspective is Fortunately, last year we managed to get a cashless system into our retail areas. We have been trying for some years, but it's just coincidental it came in last year. That came with massive challenges trying to get the system to continually working, but we've eventually got there and it's now integrated. So we're now in the 21st century with a cashless system, which is great news.
Okay, thank you. Tony, how's you got all the technology you need in Northern Ireland, or is there need for investment there too?
We haven't got all of it, but certainly we're looking at the electronic meat system Iain was talking about. And a lot of that about the technology is easy to get, I think, as long as you show the offset. So obviously the safety and the governance bit around your assurance statements, allergens, dysphagia, all of the information that we have to hold and control. And I think the closer we get to the patient in the bed and feeding the patient in the bed rather than feeding the bed will help reduce the wastage, and that should offset the technology. But same as Iain, we can't sit, we have to be moving. And that's definitely one of the things that you're at the forefront whenever you're in the HCA, because at our Learning and Development Forum, you have all of those companies with all the latest technology showcasing what they've got. So that helps keep ahead of the game.
Okay, thank you very much. Alison, could you just tell us a little bit about the technology situation in Wales?
We've with North Wales contract go out to for technology to go the same technology to go to all of Wales. We've here at CPU we've had a stock control protection system running for many. We bought into the system which is called Symbiotics, and I'm really excited about it, if I'm honest with you, because it was just controlled within CPU, and it didn't access to go to the hospitals. Now this new system we are doing, and I think I'm not sure if counterparts across England and Scotland got this, and I'm sure that I've spoken to some of them. They have. We got it now. It's gone into the hospitals, so we've got the full circle of it now. But I go back to what Brian said about technology this morning. It is essential, and I've said this, advertised this to all of my counterparts in our health board, is they need the training. They need the training. You can put the system in, but you need to input the information of what you require. We are working alongside Symbiotics, and we've been doing this now for the last 12 months, I've given them my system that I was currently using. Now I want more, because they're saying they can do more for me to have the accountability for everything that we're doing here. And that's in fairness, that's what they're doing. And when it was input into the hospitals, it's essential that each site got the staff in available to be trained and the time to be trained in that new system. And that is an essential part of what we have been going through at the hospital levels, in the catering departments there. But it's going along very, very well now, and it's definitely essential for the future, definitely.
Okay, that's great, and a very good point there about the need for the training to follow up on any investment. Brian, but perhaps I can finally come to you now. Obviously, the benefits in terms of efficiency and safety are there. What sort of argument can the HCA put forward to individual trusts to get them to see the value of investing in technology?
Well, they can look to Scotland in the first place. We've been innovative over the last 3 to 4 years. We actually started the process with Symbiotics. We've got it's a national system for us. I know that Janice's board isn't quite on that yet. They have a separate system at the moment, but they will, in due course, be moving to Symbiotics. It's not without its challenges. Certainly in my board, what we did in the first instance was we've got the back office function working. So from the production side, we've got all of that working. The part that's going to be the hardest is what we call BETMO, Bed Electronic Patient Ordering Service, and that has hit some governance issues. whereby, you know, we want to be able to give the patient the right to pick what they want from the menu. We also want to have an audit trail, and BEPMO gives us that, especially with allergens and especially with texture modified foods, where some of the risk is presented to caterers. So the BEPMO system actually removes some of that, or minimises that risk that usually always falls to the catering department. For example, a patient chokes on a sprout. They should probably never have eaten that sprout. They should have been on a texture modified diet. Who's to blame? It's usually the catering department that takes the blame for that, but actually it starts right at the very beginning of the ordering process. Nursing should have been controlling that part. Now, the electronic ordering system gives that audit trail, and it actually puts it back to the patient and to clinical side. So the benefits in terms of risk outweigh the cost element of it, because, you know, we've seen some fatalities through to someone getting the wrong allergen, or through getting a texture modified meal that wasn't probably correct. It has happened. It shouldn't happen. So just to minimise risk in itself. And as Tony said, these systems can assist with our ordering processes. They can assist with our wastage control, and it gives us the data that helps us improve on performance going forward.
Thank you very much, Brian. And that, I'm afraid, has to be it for today. My thanks to Brian, Janice, Tony, Iain and Alison, and to you too for joining us today. On the final webinar slides, you will see the logos of the PSC 100 group sponsors whose generous support makes events like today's possible. And also coming up, details of a couple of upcoming events in 2022, our own PSC Expo and the Hospital Caterers Association Leadership and Development Forum. This is our final webinar for 2021, but Public Sector Catering has plenty to look forward to, because we reveal who has made our annual top 20 of the most influential people in the industry in the December issue of the magazine. Then we gather these industry worthies round the table at the House of Commons on December the 14th to discuss the challenges faced by them and the sector, and to look at how we can best work together to meet them. And you will be able to find out what they say in our January issue. Hope to see you all in 2022. Goodbye.